It is my pleasure to introduce to you today our keynote speaker for the commencement address to the class of 2020. DeNora Getachew is New York Executive Director of Generation Citizens. DeNora is a native New Yorker and passionate advocate who over the last decade has fought to improve our democracy at the national, state, and local levels. Like many of Generation Citizens students, she was in high school when she had her light bulb moment about the importance of being a strong advocate and how to mount an advocacy campaign to seek change. DeNora attended John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Fordham University School of Law. She cut her teeth working on local democracy and government reform for former New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn. Throughout her career, DeNora has shaped state and local policy on a host of reform issues, including as campaign manager and legislative counsel at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law, policy director for then public advocate Bill de Blasio, policy director at Citizens Union, legislative director at New York State Trial Lawyers Association, and legislative attorney for the New York City Council Governmental Operations Committee. She has worked to modernize state voting and campaign finance laws, increase government accountability and transparency, improve New York City's education and social welfare systems. It is our pleasure to introduce to you DeNora Getachew.
Hello, Union Square Academy for Health Sciences, students, faculty, and family. I'm DeNora Getachew. I'm a native New Yorker and mother of 3. Sometimes I go by the name Democracy Ninja. That means I'm someone who wants to use all the tools in my toolbox to make sure that our democracy is more free, fair, and accessible for all, but especially those who have historically been marginalized and left out of our democracy and conversation. I'm so humbled and honored to be invited to be your commencement speaker today, and I come here in my capacity as the New York Executive Director of Generation Citizen. We are a national nonprofit that works to demystify democracy for all young people, but especially those who have not been invited to the conversation. We work to get civics education back into the classrooms and make it action-oriented and experiential, something we could use a lot more of right now. I want to make sure that I get all of my graduation protocol right before I get into the speech. So please join me in giving a round of applause for everyone who helped you on your educational journey over these last 4 years. Your family, your friends, your school leaders who helped shepherd you through this journey, including your principal, Mr. Ascana, your assistant principals, Ms. Cuevas and Ms. Ramos, and teachers, including Mr. Edelman and Ms. Tolesano, who I've had a pleasure of working with. Well, I've run out of corny jokes, so now it's time for the speech. I know, class of 2020, that this is not what you expected for your high school graduation. For what it's worth, I've never given a virtual commencement speech. I can't even be there to see if you're ignoring me and scrolling on your phone, but I hope I'm doing a good job. It's going to get better, I promise. Some would say that we are living through the cultural wars. Others would say we're living through the fight for what it means to be an American. I want to put it with you bluntly. We are living through the race wars. COVID-19 has exposed the disparities in our healthcare system that have long been dormant or outright ignored. For generations, our education, food security, healthcare infrastructure, and policy making has been on the back burner. This has created and perpetuated a system of inequality and generational deterioration of Black and brown communities and lives. COVID-19 has laid all of these inequities bare. Black and brown bodies and communities have been ravaged by the pandemic, and the essential workers fighting daily to save those lives are the very Black and brown people that these systems have been designed to oppress. As students of the health sciences, I am not saying anything new to you. I suspect this is what inspired you to pursue this field of study. This pandemic has been disorienting to all of us. I can only empathize with you that this does not feel like the right way to have a graduation and to finish this chapter of your academic journey. And just when you thought that COVID-19 was doing the most, as the kids would say, then came the senseless killings of Breonna Taylor, a Black woman and essential worker no less, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Rashard Brooks, and George Floyd. These killings during this pandemic set the race wars ablaze. hastening a growing and powerful movement to end police brutality, to ensure Black Lives Matter, and achieve overdue equity and liberation for people of color. Generation Citizen, and me personally, I stand in solidarity with those advocating for an end to the structures that systemically threaten Black and brown bodies and lives. But this is not a new phenomenon, young people. This is rather the culmination of a long and continued quest by youth for justice. Young people, just like you, have always been at the forefront of advocating for societal change. The reason that I do the work at Generation Citizen that I do is because I see in Action Civics the power to give you all the skills and knowledge you need to be the leaders we need today and tomorrow and into the future. I want to give a shout out to this year's graduating class, including one special student, Blessing Onisemo Ibrahim, who I've had a chance to work with and get to know through Generation Citizens. Many students in GC's Action Civics class focus their Action Civics projects on important topics to help improve New York City communities. And they're winning, just for the record, as Mr. Edelman would say. They're fighting to repeal 50A, which just got passed the New York State Legislature last week. They're fighting to convince the NYPD to stop policing street food vendors. And they were fighting to end Regents exams and elevate authentic learning. I mentioned earlier that I'm a mother of 3. One of those 3 children is a son who I had as a senior in high school. I was a pregnant teen living in the Bronx, the smallest and poorest community in our country. Becoming a pregnant teen meant that I was just another statistic by most standards. My teachers and administrators tried to persuade me to transfer from my high-achieving, rigorous academic environment to a transfer school for young girls. Though I'm a ninja, I'm also a rule follower. So I went to visit that alternative school. I wanted to see what they had to offer. Suffice it to say that I launched my first advocacy campaign as a pregnant teen to challenge the decision that I should go to a substandard school. I finished high school, I went to college. I graduated in February of 2001. After working for a year and a half, I went on to law school. My journey reflects my determination and fortitude in overcoming obstacles, but it could have turned out very differently for me. I tell that story not because I want to take a victory lap, because I want you to know that where you live does not define your destiny. Though not at the magnitude that you are facing right now, graduating during a global pandemic and the race wars, I graduated in 2001. That year was another major milestone in our country. September 11th. I applied for law school on the heels of the natural disaster that affected the world. And what I realized is that everybody was trying to find their purpose in their quest to do good. Bringing it back to the present day, I encourage you not to let this pandemic stop your vision of your future. As we live on the internet more than we ever imagined we would, I also know that one of the fundamental principles of creating and affecting change is that you need to work collectively. We can't just be slacktivists screaming into the internet. For those of you who participated in Generation Citizens Action Civics class, you know that civic engagement is a spectrum of activity that gradually requires more of us, from low levels of participation to high levels. So what we know is that democracy adapts. Every good speech is grounded in a quote. And so I'm going to ground this speech in a quote and finish it out because I'm a little bit over time. Today I chose Shirley Chisholm's quote, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas." That quote resonates with me because it's consistent with what we tell young people at Generation Citizen. We don't talk about change, we lead it. So class of 2020, I'm sorry that you're graduating in a pandemic through a virtual ceremony. But now more than ever, we need you to be scientists to find a vaccine for this and future novel coronaviruses, to be doctors on the front lines of medicine, business people innovating in the corporate sector, lawyers, activists, thought leaders, journalists, and defenders of justice and liberation to help us stand up and navigate this time to rebuild and improve our world. Anyone who's ever heard me speak has heard me say that democracy is a full contact sport. So as I leave you today, I want to make sure that you remember that this is the first step in the start of your journey, but also our society's collective journey. I said I'm a ninja for democracy. I challenge you, each and every single one, to figure out what you will be a ninja for and go pursue that. The only way that we will thrive as a global and local society is if we collaborate and take action to make our world a better place. So promise me, from that today on out, you won't stand on the sidelines, you won't whimper and complain, you will make progress by collaborating and taking action to implement ideas. Thank you.